I do have like a bunch of stuff to talk about. So Gwen sent me a TikTok from a local news station covering a Huntsville woman who gave birth at Crestwood, and they gave her a drug test, which is apparently part of giving birth in Alabama. And she popped 4 opiates because she'd eaten a poppy seed bagel, which is like such a sitcom plot line. It was like crazy that this like really happens. And she had to like go through all these hoops. And then finally, when they hired a lawyer, the CPS left them alone.
Well, but she couldn't leave the hospital unless she signed a safety plan. And so I mean, I can see why you'd be like, okay, I want to take my baby home, but I don't want to sign a safety plan because essentially that's saying I have a problem when I don't.
I mean, it commits you to all this bullshit hoop jumps, I would assume.
Yeah. I mean, I can kind of see, if in the course of some, I don't know, do they even blood test babies? I don't think they do. If the baby had some sort of symptoms of detoxing
Sure.
or had some other kind of problem, then maybe. But to routinely give a blood test to the mom, and even I think I saw another one around that because obviously once TikTok starts, it starts. Where another woman in the course of laboring, they gave her an opioid to control pain. And so then she pops positive and she has the similar thing where then now she has to have a safety plan and CPS is looking at them like she has a drug problem.
I think it was on the same one, or I saw that too.
Or
I know
maybe it
my
was,
cats have
yeah.
something
But I thought it was a
loud.
different human, a different
It was a different
woman
mom,
talking.
but it
Yeah,
might have
yeah.
been the same anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry, they.
Or maybe it was because it might have been a clip from a news story or something. I can't remember.
But I'm like,
But
how are we
like,
going to make CPS investigations funny? Like, not kill
no,
yourself
but
depressing.
the truth is that poppy seed thing is just like a bug in the system, obviously.
Right.
And if I took a test today, I took a tramadol yesterday because my back was killing me. So, I mean, obviously, I'm not in the baby making business anymore, but I, thank God.
If you're giving birth, you've got other questions to answer.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is, but it was surprising to see right here in Huntsville. I had no idea that they were routinely doing talk screens on new moms.
I had read about that a while ago, but I did, and I still can't know how widespread it is. Like it varies from state to state, hospital to hospital,
Hmm.
probably. So it's unclear how common that is. And it wasn't even like totally clear to me whether Crestwood actually does literally drug test every birthing parent or whether
Yeah.
it's
It
more
wasn't clear.
random or discretionary. Like it's not clear to me, which is unfortunate. I feel like that's something that's worth knowing. But I think that CPS is interesting, and so I have a bunch of links on it, and like I had collected a little bit of like data on it, and I was just looking at what I'd collected, and the stats are crazy. So like if you want to know like is this a thing worth thinking about? I think it's
Hmm.
worth knowing that I saw an estimate that CPS will investigate like almost 40% of American children before they turn 18. So the parents of 40% of US children will get some kind of interaction with CPS, which is
That seems,
mind-blowing.
yeah, seriously mind blowing.
Now, I think it makes a little more sense when you consider that a lot of these parents will have a bunch of children. So like if you have 5 children and you get investigated for one thing or like one
Right.
time,
Then
then
that's counting five.
5 American children
Yeah.
had
So that
an
increases
investigation.
as a percentage.
So, but
Huh.
still, that's wild.
So, so this is a little off topic a little bit, but I think I meant, I don't know, maybe we were talking in the car, I don't remember, but we were talking about methamphetamine and how when I was
as
a
we do.
reporter, yes, as we do, when I was a reporter, I'd covered three child murders, and they were all committed by um, primarily a male, either step parent or parent, who who was having methamphetamine psychosis, and then they killed this baby or toddler, and it was more active. It wasn't just like neglect and the child died of dehydration or starvation or something. It was violent. But in one of the trials I covered, I remember they had uh one of those people who talk in a trial, sit on a stand, people ask them
A
questions.
witness.
Oh, witness, thank you, God. I really am tired. So they had witnesses saying how this dad, or I can't remember in this case, it was dad or stepdad, but I remember it was the name of the guy was Chris Nason, and they were talking. Someone in their apartment complex witnessed this guy picking up the toddler by the arm and carrying him up the stairs by the arm. And I remember clearly thinking, and I probably had my youngest child, maybe was 4 at the time. I remember clearly thinking, oh my gosh, if something bad happened to one of my kids, there are probably neighbors who could say, yeah, I saw her spank the kid or yell at the kid getting out of the car, or picking the kid up by the arm because the kid is having a tantrum on the driveway and we got to get him off the driveway and in the app. So I remember thinking, "Oh my gosh, that something someone witnesses can, in isolation, be completely innocent, but taken in the case of something bad happened, could be used as testimony against a person and supporting the DA's argument that someone had done this terrible thing to a child." Um, I don't know if I was a abusive mom or just was just thinking of it more um, openly or more broadly about how we all can in isolation without context, people can see something and it could be misinterpreted to be something else. So in this case, she had a poppy seed bagel, and now she has a drug problem and has to do a safety plan before she can take her baby home. Um, and I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is, right? We have these A, B in statistics. We have these A, B problems, right? And one is you can't ever risk a child being abused and killed. That's so we're going to have all kinds of laws that might. It's in that instance, it's better for an innocent person to be accused of something than to have a child die, and we look at it that way. And so we have this over prosecution. We have these interactions where 40% of all children are investigated by CPS before they're 18. Um, and no one wants to be responsible for something bad happening and something falling through the cracks. But on the other hand, there's all these people who are innocent who end up, you know, having their lives fucked over because we're being super cautious as we should be. So I don't know what the right answer is, but
And obviously, it's, like, worse than that because it's the overcautiousness is not evenly distributed.
yeah,
So, it's not like we're just randomly, like, over-involving ourselves in families' lives. It's I'm not gonna say it's strategic, but there's bias in the system, certainly. So,
yeah,
I spent a lot of time reading today, trying to figure out, like, what is the data on so we have very good data on how Black families, and Native families are disproportionately represented in, CPS, every level of CPS from, like, um, substantiated reports to investigations to actions taken to placement into foster care to termination of parental rights. Like at every
Mhm.
level, Black families are overrepresented relative to their percentage of the population. And so the question is like, is the extent to which they're overrepresented at the same level as the percentage at which they're overrepresented in actual maltreatment? And like one of the things that is true is that the factors that are associated with maltreatment are more commonly found in Black families. So things like poverty, early motherhood, single motherhood,
Mhm.
physical and mental illness, and these kinds of things. And so, growing up in low quality neighborhoods, having people in the home who are not biologically related to the child, all these things are risk factors for abuse and neglect, and obviously are inextricably linked with systemic racism. And it's just really hard to know because most of the time the researchers are not in the homes with the children, like documenting maltreatment. So we have to go with proxy measures, which is difficult. But yeah, and I think it's interesting, like how much of there's so much I want to say about this, but I think one of the things that I really want to get across is that a lot of it has to do with like the incentives of the system. So unfortunately, when it comes to how CPS is going to handle this, like it's very especially in the beginning stages, it's like very up to individual discretion. Like you have to just kind of use
Mhm.
your best judgment,
Yeah.
which obviously opens up all kinds of opportunity for bias. Um, I do think that the fact that like these agencies are probably not like super well resourced leads to a lot of bias, like the example of the woman who, the white middle class woman who popped in Huntsville. Her family hired a lawyer, like the agency retreated. And I'm sure that that's like often the case versus like the family who doesn't have the wherewithal to fight back, um, less so. And I think it's like
Yeah.
it's coded in one of the articles I read, I think it was Mother Jones. It talked about a woman who got into a fight with her boyfriend. The cops were called. That led to a CPS report. So a CPS agent showed up at the apartment and says, "Do you use drugs?" And the mother answered honestly, like, "Yeah, I smoke weed sometimes." So then that led to, um, an investigation. And
Mm.
then this woman had to go to um, mandatory drug treatment program, mandatory parenting classes, all these hoops that she had to pay for and take time out of her day and no consideration for her work schedule. So she quits work to comply with these requirements just to keep her children in her house. If you don't have a job, like that's a problem for being a fit parent. So she ends up losing her kids anyway. So she has
Mhm.
she doesn't have her kids in her home. She doesn't have a job. It's like, and it's like, in what universe? Like all the data is like could not be clearer that in terms of being a good parent, uh, like drinking alcohol is way worse than smoking weed. Like, you know,
Yeah. Oh,
um,
no. I mean, and I'm like, I don't do either. But it's very clear to me, knowing that alcohol is contributory to all kinds of domestic violence, whereas weed is not. I mean, that there the evidence can be clear,
not even
but
violence,
yet
like every outcome you'd want to look at,
yeah, but
neglect.
yet we don't test people for that. We don't It seems completely normal for someone not. You know what I mean? Like, you go to
Yeah,
work, and if you're hungover or even have alcohol in your system because you drank half the night, no one's asking, no one's testing, no one's,
right,
but then we do these routine drug screens that test for pot.
right. So that's just like if the people operating in the system had any confidence in their ability to like use their discretion, like a little like tiny like smidgen of common sense would be like it's not worth pursuing. This mother smokes weed occasionally, like, okay, next.
Yeah.
But I think that CPS is symptomatic of like a larger problem within like large bureaucracies where if you use your discretion and it goes well, great, nothing happens. You don't get rewarded. You don't get a pat on the back. Like, you don't get a
But something bad
raise.
happens, and that is all over the newspaper. So it's
Yeah, like it's a huge deal if you use your discretion and it goes wrong. And so people learn not to use their discretion. They go by their checkbox. Oh, uses drugs. On to the next thing. And it's this meat
Mhm.
grinder of idiocy that inures the agents and the agency and the judges and everyone responsible for operating the machinery from any kind of blowback or consequences, but it does not accomplish what the agency is supposed to like exist for. um and so I think that, you know, obviously there are like huge problems with trying to get these kinds of things done at a more like ad hoc community level through like clubs or churches or, you know, community groups. But that is one benefit that they have over these highly regimented bureaucracies, that they have incentives. It's more aligned. The incentive system is more aligned for these individuals to use their judgment as opposed to just mindlessly putting people through the system.
well, it's difficult. See, that's the challenge, right? With anything in a bureaucracy is it's easy to set outputs, right? But it's harder to measure outcomes. And the challenge is that the outcome we want is healthy, happy, safe children.
Right.
But it's harder to measure that than it is to measure, are there drugs in the home? Is the kid showing up at school on time? I mean, all the things, right? You
Is the
can,
heat on?
yeah,
Yeah.
those are
No,
all
for sure.
outputs that you can measure, but
Right.
they are often counter to the outcome you're looking for.
And it's
And
also like where are you measuring? Because the crazy thing about it to me is that over the course of a lifetime, the costs of removing a child from their home are astronomical. Like, it's hard to measure, but like there are certain things we can measure. We know that removing a child from a home, um, regardless of the circumstances, just on average, when you
mhm,
remove a child from a home, more absenteeism at work, worse physical health, worse mental health, greater likelihood of criminal activity, greater likelihood of incarceration, more periods of joblessness, like everything that you would not want to see, you're more likely to see as a result of taking a child out of their home. And these are things that not only do you not want to see, but they're like very expensive for
mhm.
society. And so it's like, but CPS agencies are not held accountable for the long-term effects,
No.
the long-term cost to society of removing a child from their home.
Well, and the other challenge is like all the influences on outcomes with people and their productivity as an adult is that there's so many things that have contributed. And so
Sure.
to unpack it all, it's not like there's a straight line between outcome at 25 years old and input at taking a child out of the home or um you know poverty or malnutrition or all the things that contribute to the outcome of someone as a young adult. It's hard to kind of untangle them.
It is hard, but, you know, they have kind of tried, so they've kinda looked at, like, um, to the extent we can hold all of these things steady, you know, what is, like, most closely associated to, like, you know, Uh, uh, being removed from your home is an adverse childhood experience. There are lots of them, and so you can say that, like, and they compound, right? So they try to correct for all the other childhood adverse childhood experiences and positive childhood experiences to like figure out what the impact is going to be. And it's pretty drastic. And so, yeah, it's interesting. Like it's a kind of risk aversion as well, where it's like if a kid, is ends up in the hospital or God forbid dies, we absolutely have to prevent that risk, but then
Mhm.
you're guaranteeing the harm of the removal um, down the line.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't again, I often get to this, "Oh my gosh, I don't know what to do."
Well, I think one thing that would be really obviously helpful, in my opinion, would be a very large percentage, um, most, I believe, CPS investigations are more about neglect than abuse. And when it comes to like what constitutes neglect, like it's hugely poverty. And so
Mhm.
it used to be I think it, from what I read, it changed in the 90s. But before then, if poverty seemed to be keeping a person from being a good parent or like providing their kids what they needed, the government would give the parent money, like here's the money that you need to provide your kids with what they need. And then in the 90s, they started to advocate for taking children out of the homes of the impoverished parents and then paying other families to take care of those children. And it's like, well, that seems wild, like that just seems like obviously like not the thing to do.
Right.
Um,
If money's the solution and it but
right.
it's right, to reallocate the resources, take the child out, reallocate those resources, give them to somebody else. Instead, you could have solved the problem by giving the money to the parents.
Right. There was a really interesting example I read a while ago where it was a mom and she was an addict. And so they, obviously you can't just give an addict a monthly check and expect that to go well. And so, but they had a grandmother and the grandmother really was like ready and willing. But the grandmother didn't have a lot of money,
Mhm.
enough money either. And so the state, rather than having the grandmother be the foster parent and give the foster money to the grandparent, gave it to a different couple. And it's like,
Yeah.
what is going on here? That is so just obviously not a good idea.
So what do you think of minimum basic income? Since we're talking about money and giving people money. Um,
I think the two arguments against I like it. I think that it's better. I will say to me the like UBI, universal basic income or
yeah.
minimum basic income, like the UBI MBI light would be, I firmly believe in kind assistance. Every program of in kind assistance should be replaced with cash assistance. Like give
Mhm.
people cash. I think it's incredibly paternalistic to give people services rather than cash. I think it's insulting. I think it's inefficient. Um, I think it's a very good opportunity for corruption and graft. Um, it's Studies show like it doesn't work as well. Cash
Mhm.
transfers tend to benefit people more than in kind services and goods. That's one thing I think we could do if we had the political will tomorrow. That would be an improvement. In terms of like a minimum income, I think one like even if we replaced every assistance program, um, if we took all the money that goes into every assistance program and put it into that, it still wouldn't cover the cost of doing it. So like that's an issue.
Mhm.
But then the other thing, which I think is actually more compelling, is what it would do to inflation. So like basically like people would just start charging more for basic necessities once a
Because
lot
they
of people
know
had a
that
lot more cash.
yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I would be a proponent, but I've come since I've known you, I have spent more time thinking about ineffectiveness of some of the policies I've always believed in, and how so universal basic income is one of those things, right? If it increases inflation, if it um if it causes these unplanned outcomes, I really haven't spent as much time thinking about that until I met you, and that's because you have you I think I would say that you're a kind-hearted, liberal person, but you also came to those positions from a very different way than I did. And so you're thinking in terms of libertarianism and those kinds of free market values that I would probably say I was generally opposed to, just kind of have been sort of Marxist since I can remember. Um, and even though logically I know that Marxism has not worked anywhere in our globe, I still think if we're all pure-hearted, kind, non-prideful people, that that is the best way to go. But I mean, that's not right. And also, I'm seeing, okay, we're in a situation right now where we have enormous debt and as a country, and we can't afford to continue to pay the social services that we're doing now. So how could we afford to do these other things? Now, my personal feeling is that the ridiculously wealthy, and I'm not talking about people who even make a couple of $1 million. I'm talking about, you know, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, all these, you know, really, really crazy wealthy people, and the corporations that they own are not paying their fair share. And I think there is still enough to go around, and that if they paid their fair share and we increased the taxes to those kinds of people and businesses, that we could afford to do the things I believe that we should do for people. But we obviously don't have the political will to do that, and we can't keep going down the path we're on. So while from a purely theoretical ideological perspective, I'm totally for universal basic income. I don't think people should have um, to survive, should have to work as hard as they have to. And the other part of it is we don't all come with the same level of resources. Like we don't all have the same intellectual capacity. We can't all get university degrees or advanced degrees. We don't all have the same earning power because of the way our capitalist society works. And so you, people work way harder than I do and make far, far less than I do because I have the opportunity to do the kind of work I do. And that just doesn't seem fair or right. And so there's people should be able to affords certain basic things, and I think that that level is higher than other people I know think, right? And people, and again with the cash, it's degrading and humiliating to say and then that poor people shouldn't be able to have a cell phone. I mean, that was a big deal when cell phones
Yeah.
were not as ubiquitous, that they shouldn't have a cell phone, or people who use a Snap card and someone sees that they have, you know, a steak in their cart and not ground turkey. I don't know what. But people feel very comfortable criticizing. There'll be people on TikTok or in newspaper articles, wherever they put their opinions, will say that people who are poor, they shouldn't have a pedicure. They shouldn't. I mean, that's just to me, that is like mean and horrible and mean
It's
spirited.
also very gendered.
Yeah. Yes, and you're right, Mary. They should pay employees more. It's ridiculous that they're billionaires and their employees have to be subsidized by food assistance.
It's so complicated, and I think that's what I really started to appreciate more as I've gotten older. If you start to look at, like, okay, when I was younger, I was like a market fundamentalist, you know? We just have to get the government out of the way. Every exchange should be voluntary. If everybody's working in their own interests, but they do it voluntarily, then everybody gets richer and like soon we'll get to post scarcity, blah, 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 which is very simple, very attractive, doesn't really work. It's not really that clear cut, actually. And so when you look at like, why don't companies pay their employees more? Well, there's a bunch of reasons, but one of the reasons is that if you're a company and you decide to pay your employees more, and as a result, the returns to shareholders are lower, then you get replaced by the board who represents shareholders because that's their incentive to do that.
And I mean, I'm not an economist by any means, and a lot of this kind of escapes me, but I do think that as I listen to podcasts, that it wasn't always this
No,
way, right? That
no.
shareholders and the purpose of companies has not
Hmm.
always been to return greater and greater profits to shareholders.
To this extent, yeah, that
Yeah.
seems to be true. Um,
And yeah. And why is that? Like, how rich do people have to be?
yeah, I think that is so interesting. If you look at somebody like Mark Zuckerberg, and it's like, why? Or like, I don't know. To me, like if I look at like Elon Musk, right? Like, I feel like I can model, like, I understand Elon Musk like a million times more than Mark Zuckerberg because, like, say what you will about him, and I've said a lot and I will continue to. He's he has ambitions. Like, he wants to do stuff. He wants to go to Mars. He wants to like repopulate the planet. He cares about stuff. Is it the right stuff? Probably not. Is he
But
going about it the right
but
way?
is
Absolutely not.
creating something,
He wants the world to be
advanced
different in some way.
technology. Yes. Yes.
Mark Zuckerberg, like,
Social media.
what are you doing? Like, you don't seem to want the world to be different in any way, except that you're richer and Facebook is bigger. Like, it's so boring.
Yeah. I get that, right? The it's like w- I've been watching The Gilded Age, and
I love it.
George Russell is trying to connect the whole country by railroad, and this hang up is Chicago and the links of in Chicago. But I mean that is something that really is world changing, and we can see now looking back that it did change the world to have coast to coast transportation by train. It meant that people could have goods and services faster and cheaper, and so there is
Which is
something.
analogous to Starlink.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, Facebook, I mean, I love Facebook, don't get me wrong, but
I'm on it a lot.
I actually don't love it as much. When I first got on it was probably in the mid 2000s, and I loved it because it was a way that I could reconnect with people that I'd known in kindergarten in, 1966, that I
Yeah.
hadn't heard of or seen or anything. And that was really exciting and fun to reconnect with people that I had completely lost touch with. Um, and I do still like, seeing their kids and grandkids pictures, but it it is kind of um vapid, I mean, when you're thinking of creating creating the things that Elon Musk is creating and Facebook.
And the whole like broing out and doing MMA and wearing the, white tee and the gold chain. And I don't it's just like imagine being a billionaire and you're still not secure in your masculinity. And it's like really and you're doing it in a really obvious like way. Amazing.
Yeah. I I'm in kind of free association here, but I saw a clip with Charles Barkley, and he said that after they do the show, whatever sports cast show he does, I don't know, that
It's
they
not
would
what
go
people
out.
tune into this for.
Yeah, no, and they would go out as a group, and he didn't realize that he, that people like don't he didn't even know what a mortgage was. I mean, he seriously said he did not know what a mortgage was. And maybe the people who are coming out with them to have a drink after the show are crew members who have mortgages, right? And who have to send their kid to public school. And it was shocking to me that he said, "I didn't know what a mortgage was. I didn't know that people couldn't send their kids to private school." And he was just it was like this light had dawned on him, and he was being sensitive about that, which that's the thing I appreciated, that um he got that he was out of touch with everyday people, the rest of us. And Charles Barkley is multi-million dollar. He's not Elon Musk rich. He's not
Right.
Jeff Bezos rich. He's not. And so how can they possibly, Mark Zuckerberg, how can they possibly have any connection to everyday life anymore?
Totally. Totally. It's admirable. I think I was thinking about it earlier today after doing the reading on CPS. And it's funny because it's like I grew up on a public assistance, reduced price lunch, food stamps, who knows even what all we got. Um, we had our lights turned off. Like I'm not like totally insulated from experiences of poverty by any stretch of the imagination. We had
Mm.
burglar bars on our windows, yada yada. But like I went to college at 18. My, dad paid my tuition, so I graduated without debt. I entered the job market with a degree and have worked, my whole career in white collar work and have had a pretty charmed life, frankly, economically speaking. And so, uh, and things have changed, and I'm white. So, but I just feel like I have this intuition based on like what I've read and like people I've talked to that there's an experience of life that like probably there's some threshold, not hard and fast, but on average that below which like life is just like really, really different in ways that you couldn't catalog because there's too many of these differences. And like one would be, um, you know, you are not even that you are investigated by CPS, but like, that if you were investigated by CPS, you could hire a lawyer and get it handled versus that if you were investigated by CPS, you couldn't. Right. And like,
Or that you are constantly, that is just an expectation in your life, that CPS may
right,
investigate your family,
right,
right?
right. Like as you're making decisions,
Yeah, that is
that is the
something you've
thing that you need
considered.
to consider.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Well put. And I don't have to consider that. I guess Cat Protective Services could come by, but I don't think that that's a thing.
Well, I don't know, because I felt like when I adopted a cat, they were very strict. One.
They were, yeah, that's true. It's funny. Yeah, you have to go through more hoops to adopt a cat than to like have a human baby.
Yeah.
um,
But how do we feel about that? Because that is, see, I'm tired, so I'm just gonna pre-associate. But I think there are some people who believe there should be some sort of means test to become a parent. And I've never thought that, because I feel like it's a human right. Now, should everyone be a parent? No. Is everyone going to be a good parent? No. But I do think it's a human right to be a parent. And so I would be against any kind of means testing, or, people say all the time, and we're joking that it's harder to get a cat than it is to give birth to a human. But in all seriousness, we're not equipped as a society to put rules on something like that wouldn't be discriminatory for all the same biases that the things are biased. And so we can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, luckily, I don't know if I'm gonna put it that way, but, luckily in one sense, we and by we, I mean, certainly certain parts of the United States, have tried to put limits on who can have babies, and it didn't really do what we expected it to, and it created a lot of extra problems along the way. So it's not an untested theory. Like, what happens when you do this? We tried it. It's not good. So yeah, I'm totally obviously like against like uh that version of eugenics. I you know I really feel very conflicted, to be honest with you, about it. I'm not conflicted about should it be illegal. Should it be like stigmatized to have children? All of the available evidence would indicate you're not prepared to care for. Maybe, maybe. I don't know because like I personally feel very upset when I see people have kids that I don't think that they're going to be able to take care of, and especially when I turn out to be right and they can't. That feels really
Mhm.
selfish and um, mean and bad. But
Okay.
yeah,
Sorry,
so
I'm looking for a outlet to plug my phone in. Um, yeah, I don't know what the right answer is, right? You can't because how do you figure out what the right way to do that is?
especially like income is I think one thing that is true that's really like nobody wants to admit is that like poverty, well, what is poverty? There's a correlation between certain easily measurable things like uh are you in debt? Have you paid your bills on time? Do you have a criminal record? Do you have a crippling mental illness? Like, and being a good parent, though, like those associations exist. It is somewhat predictive, but not perfectly. You know,
Mhm.
anything that you could look at, you will find many, many, many exceptions of people who are cripplingly mentally ill and excellent parents somehow.
Or you will
Like
see someone who on the outside everything the house is clean, the house is nice, they have a good
totally,
job, whatever, and then they're doing terribly abusive things to children.
totally
But and I do think there are things that on average you can
right.
are predictive, um but we also have a bias about that. That's why there are people who aren't believed, kids who aren't believed, or parents who aren't investigated because we do have these biases or these conclusions based on averages.
Totally.
Um,
And just the ease of measuring, I think, is a huge deal. Like, what's the temperature in the apartment is black and white, easily
mm,
measurable.
mm.
Um, but like
Is it too hot or too cool that makes someone lose their mind?
man. But like I think something like how much yelling is too much. How do you How do you prove how much yelling happens? Where do you draw the line of like that's too much yelling? That it's much harder to like to measure and draw lines and quantify around a lot of kinds of abuse and like markers of poverty, for example. And I think that makes it really hard.
Yeah, and I think that there is the relative nature of that, the subjective decision making
Totally.
around that, right? So you and we've talked, right? And so for people who haven't heard, Kathy and I are very, very close friends, but we've only known each other since last November. And I would say that I don't have friends any closer than you.
Hmm.
But yet we haven't known each other that long. So we're still getting to know each other. So we'll be driving around in the car and we'll be talking and I will say another trauma that happened in my life. and and we've talked about how if you just took this list of trauma in my life, you would expect that on average I would have these bad outcomes. But for some reason, when we talked about it in terms of optimism and, waking up thinking, oh, today's going to be a good day, and how some people um, don't do that. So, that is yelling, is that bad? Drinking, how much alcohol consumption in a home feels normal or not normal, how much yelling, all those kinds of things are hard to one measure because they're behind someone's closed door, and two, if someone were to ask somebody, were you abused as a child, some people might get yelled at once in a while for doing something, whatever that kids do, and say, yeah, I was abused. My dad yelled at me when I lied about whatever. And then there are other people who actually, in my view, were abused, like hit with a belt, for example. I knew people who got hit with a belt when they were kids. It was very common in the 60s and 70s. And if that had happened to me, I definitely would have thought that was abuse. I would never have used a belt to strike my children. But I also know that I have plenty of friends who were struck with a belt when they were growing up, who looking back do not think that they were abused as children.
Yes, all that. I think that is so interesting. And it makes me think of several things. So let me try to remember because we're both struggling. I think it's really interesting how there's a theory that happiness is like your happiness band is kind of by the time you're out of childhood, it's like set. It's like a mix of like early childhood experiences and genes. And so, you know, I look at so I think like, yeah, you've gone through all these traumas, but I
Just
also
in
think
time,
that
because
like,
Michelle just joined.
"Hi, mom." Yeah. We're talking about childhood, traumas.
Oh.
Perfect. Um, you know, you've been through all these, like, you know, absolutely unequivocally, traumatic experiences, and you are not just, like, happy and grateful and optimistic, but, like, not cynical, all these things that you would think that you would be, and I look at my childhood and I'm like, it was objectively, like, not traumatic. It was I was very safe, I was well cared for, all these things, but,
Mhm.
like, I am just, like, a really, like, anxious person, and, there's a lot of depression and anxiety in my family, and, I think I inherited, a tendency toward that, and so, I've thought about, like, would it be fair for me to have a kid and bestow that genetic inheritance onto them, where I could raise them perfectly, but, like, if they have a tendency for anxiety and depression, like, I don't know that they would be able to escape that no matter what I did, and when I look at mom would spank us with a wooden spoon,
Mm.
uh, and but I don't think of that as I don't even think about that, like, that was not traumatic for me. The stress that I felt and the anxiety and the, like, um, other aspects of growing up were way harder for me to deal with, so it's like um how people experience the same events are so different, and how
Yeah.
they impact them in adulthood are so different, and it's just really interesting, and the other thing I'll say as well is that, like, there's a theory that what makes something traumatic is the extent to which you have social support before, during, and after, and I
Mhm.
think, like, the way they say it in AA is, "You're only as sick as your secrets," and so I think the fact that you can talk about these things that happen to you, like, pretty straightforwardly and, like, with somebody maybe you haven't known for, like, super, super long is, you know, both a signal that you're not traumatized by them and why you're not traumatized by them, if that makes sense.
I absolutely believe that talking about the trauma in our lives makes a huge difference because I had times when I couldn't talk. Like, I was probably in my 30s before I would tell someone that my dad died of alcoholism. He'd been sick. He had been mugged when I was small, and, um and that all contributed to the alcoholism, but he actually died of alcoholism, and I was in my 30s before I could say that, and partly because I was in the Mormon church, so there's a culture of not drinking, but yeah, once I could say that, and also with the challenges that I've had with some of my kids, being able to talk about it does make a huge difference because you let go of the shame
The
and
shame.
the aloneness, right? The worst
Yes,
thing about bad things happening is feeling like you're all alone in it. And once you
absolutely.
don't feel like you're all alone, then it does release most of the anxiety around it.
Totally. I have found that to be very true in my own life. Like speaking it takes the power out of it.
Mhm.
Um, I found that with like my irritable bowel syndrome, like because to speak it, you have to look it in the face and just like looking it in the face, like this is what I'm afraid of. Like that's just really makes it to where you can wrap your arms around it and it doesn't seem like this big scary like blob of unknown size and
Well, and we really have like let's talk about irritable bowel. So that
but
is something pooping. We have such a difficult time talking about it. We have such a difficult time talking about it. And it's so funny because I have kind of a gut thing, and I will have nightmares, literal nightmares. And I'm out somewhere and I don't have underwear, I don't have wipes, I don't have, and it's terrifying. But we don't talk about it. It's like we'd rather talk about, like last week, talk about uh, orgasmic meditation and clitoris stroking than we do talking about pooping and how challenging that is and how we have this shame around it. I don't It's such an odd thing. I mean, if you kind of think about it, I do not talk about it. Usually I have shame around it and embarrassment around it and stuff. But really when you think about it, like they say in the little kids book, everybody poops or something. I don't know if it's the potty training book, but yeah, why is that? We feel like it's some sort of personal failing.
yeah, I mean, I think there's like evolutionary reasons that make sense, right? Like if everybody's just pooping everywhere, that doesn't bode well for health and hygiene. And so, wanting to poop away from other people to keep other people away from your poop and all that makes sense. But the extent to which we take it, I think being in Asia was really interesting. Because they just have a very different, like, not to like, I mean, I'm obviously like super overgeneralizing, but it just feels like, especially in Tokyo, but in Taipei as well, it just it seems a lot more matter of fact.
Yeah.
They seem to be a lot more matter of fact about pooping, and that seemed really good. And I've been thinking about it too because like I I remember having this like horrible fear of hemorrhoids. I remember like somebody told me like they were dealing with hemorrhoids and like I realized what that was and I'm like, "Oh my god, that seems like the worst thing ever." And spoiler alert, like I've had them and like they're not great, but there's nothing inherently worse about a hemorrhoid than any other
Pain.
discomfort except the
Mm.
shame. And I'm like thinking I'm really trying to look into like not that this is even possible because there's no hard line that doesn't really exist, but not just look at like, oh, I was fucked over by evangelical Christianity and like the adults in my life, but also like what did I bring to the table in terms of like my personality, my genes, my whatever. And so like, yeah, I mean, I was taught a lot, that sex outside of marriage and like people looking at my body was shameful and
Mm.
sinful and bad. Like the evangelical church didn't tell me to be super weird about my butthole and like poop. I not that I
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that was a me thing, or
Yeah.
a culture thing or whatever. But it's just interesting to see that these things are existing and arbitrary, and it's been beautiful. I wrote about some of my butt problems probably a year ago, and so many people came to me in DMs and said like I have this problem or I had this problem, and like I heard several people were like I've never told anyone, not even my spouse. And I loved that. I felt so honored to be a safe place for them to
Yeah.
talk about it.
But it is wild because it's just a natural human function, but yet we still my husband is not like that. Like, he just talks about it. It's just a function, and he talks about it, and I that was something that was, like, hard for me to get used to because I grew up not in a household like that, and, so can I tell, like, the most wonderful surprise that happened to me in the last couple of months?
For sure, and I'm very curious if it has to do with buds.
Oh, it totally has to do with butts. So you went to Taipei and Tokyo, and when you came home, you bought a fancy toilet seat that has a bidet and it's warm and it's so nice. And I was at your house a few weeks ago and I had to pee and I went in there and the toilet seat was warm and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing." And that was such a pleasant surprise. It was so wonderful. So yes.
It's so
Yeah.
funny because I had a potluck and I overheard somebody be like, "I hated that."
Really?
Yeah. Which if it's like a busy time and you don't know if it's because the seat is warmed or somebody warmed it for you, like I
Oh,
could see
yeah,
that.
yeah. Yeah, I guess so. That seems but, it is interesting because I've lived lots of places, and gone lots of places, and they treat, pooping very differently.
Yeah.
And, the Japanese and probably in Taiwan too, they have those fancy, fancy toilet
Yeah.
seats and stuff, which I love. But a lot of places at least have some sort of water, like a lot of Middle Eastern
Yeah.
cultures and stuff would never think to use paper. It's water and and they have all kinds of customs around which hand you can shake and stuff like that because of the uncleanliness and stuff. And it is a little bit shocking to me, and in my husband's family, I think everybody now has some sort of bidet and are just like, "Why paper?" So what is it about our society that it's weird.
Big toilet paper, big
Yeah,
lumber, I don't know. I think it's really
maybe.
weird.
Yeah, it's the
Big hemorrhoid cream. Did you get a bidet?
I have we have one, but it's just cold. It's cold
Yeah, yeah.
water with a thing, and so we're still talking about it because we don't have a good way to hook up the electricity. But I think in
Mm.
our room there is a fan light, and so I think it would be like super cheap for an electrician to come in and just put a plug in there. So I'm still lobbying for that particular change in our bathroom.
Lest you think we're too fancy, we literally just ran an extension cord and it's on the floor and it looks janky as hell, but we'll deal with it later, but that's how we've
Yeah,
got it powered. You've seen it. Okay, my friend is in town, and so I'm gonna
go to
end it
church today.
at 8. What?
I go to church today. That sounds like a perfect thing to do. Is spend time with your friend. And
Yeah.
thanks everyone for joining us and letting us just
Thank you.
talk, complete free association about weird things or whatever.
With some tie to gender usually, but sometimes it's a more tenuous tie than other times.
Yeah, yeah. So have fun with your friend, and thanks
Thank
everybody, and we'll
you.
see you next week.
That sounds great. Thank you, Gwen. Thank you all. See y'all later.
Bye.